What's going on? My name is Marshall James, and I've teamed up with House Music US to help you guys get started producing. I'm going to be showing you guys how I make a house track from scratch, but we're going to be making this as simple as possible. So even if you've never opened up Ableton before, you're going to be able to follow along. So first things first, I'm opening up a blank Ableton project. In the top left, we have our tempo, and we can set that by clicking and dragging on this or just typing in a number. I think a good place to start is 128 BPM. Some house tracks are a little bit faster, some are a little bit slower. I think 128 is a nice middle ground, but you can pick whatever tempo you want. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up arrangement view by clicking tab on our keyboard. Alternatively, you could click the top right to flip-flop back and forth. This view here is called session view. I know a lot of producers that like to use session view to sketch ideas. I pretty much work entirely in arrangement view, so that's what we're going to be doing. And in the arrangement view, you can see we have an audio clip and a MIDI clip. These are just different channels that we can throw certain elements of our track in. Like we can throw a clap into one, we could throw a kick into another one. Each are used in slightly different ways. I typically use audio for pretty much majority of sample-based things. So like kick samples, clap samples, anything that's like an audio file, I'm going to be putting into my audio tracks. But anything like a synth or something I can physically play, I'm going to be using a MIDI channel for that. So when I start a new project, I usually start projects in many different ways, either by writing a bass line first, writing my drums first, but I always pick my kick first. And there's an important reason for that, because if you don't have a good kick and a good bass, it's hard for that track to sometimes translate onto the dance floor. So let's find a kick. I've actually collected a number of kicks over the years, so I have a big collection of kicks. But if you don't have a collection of kicks, there's a brand new feature in Ableton, which is its integration with Splice. Now, if you don't know what Splice is, it's basically a massive database of royalty-free samples that you could just use in your projects. So if I wanted to find a kick, I would look up kick, and there's 238,000 different kicks I can pick from, which is insane. So if you don't have a sample library already, just use Splice. I'm just going to go to my trusty pack of just a bunch of kicks that I've saved over the years. And so I'm just going to drag them onto my audio channel, and we're just going to listen to a few, see if we find one that we like. So I like this kick, so I'm actually just going to crop this kick so it's just a single kick. And then we're going to duplicate this kick on every beat of our tempo. So if you think about house music, everything comes in fours. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and it goes on. If we look at our numbers at the top here, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's the next bar. 2, 3, 4, next bar. 2, 3, 4. So each one of these like numbers at the top is where we're going to place our kick. So we're just going to duplicate this all the way across to the end of the fourth bar. I'm just going to turn on my loop button here and then make sure that this gray bar is between the first bar and the end of the fourth bar. So now that when it gets to the end here, it's just going to go back to the beginning, and we're just going to loop this section. Great, so we've picked a kick out now. We're about 40% of the way there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find either a clap or a hat. I'm going to load up another audio channel here. I'm just going to go under all my sample packs, and I'm going to look up open hat. Now, this open hat is going to sit in between each kick. Not on every beat, but in between each beats, there's going to be an open hat. So let's find one that we like the sound of. Great, so I like the sound of this hat. It's like a classic 909 open hat. It's heard in like a lot of dance tracks. If this wasn't already in a loop and it was just the single hat, we're just going to place it in between each of the kicks. And then we can highlight this, Control D, Control D, Control D. Now we have our open hat. So now that I'm adding more elements other than my kick, I'm gonna start to adjust the volume of some of these sounds because I want my kick to be the loudest thing. I'm just gonna maybe turn down the volume of this hat just a little bit so that that kick is still the loudest thing in my track. Great, perfect. And I'm actually just gonna label these. So I'm gonna call this channel my kick. I'm gonna call this channel my open hat. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna find a clap. So we're gonna load up another audio channel and let's look up clap. Great, I like this clap. It's an 808 clap. Again, we're just gonna crop it out. And every other kick, so not the first kick, but every second kick, we're gonna place the clap on top of that. Again, lower the volume of that clap a little bit, and then let's listen to it now. Super straightforward, the most basic house groove that you can think of. If we want to add a little bit more character to this, we can load up another audio channel and we can look up a top loop. So what a top loop is it's basically an entire drum loop without the kick. If you're new to producing, there is no shame and there is no issue with using drum loops. I use drum loops all the time. It is a super useful tool to help you spark ideas and just get things moving, especially when you're creating a project. Let's try some of these top loops here. Again, I'm gonna turn down the volume a little bit because I want my main elements that I already picked out to shine. This top loop is there to just add another extra bit of texture and a little bit of layers. So that one sounds good. Let's try a couple other ones. I really like that one. So I'm going to save that one. I'm just going to slide it outside of our loop. Let's see if we can find another one that maybe sounds a little bit better. If not, we're just going to stick with that one. Great, so now I've found two loops. I really like both of them, so I'm just going to listen to them again and just pick which one I like more. So I actually like the original one better, but I could very easily just use this one instead. This is the great thing about loops, is it's very easy to plug and play and then just get a different kind of feeling out of your track. Now that we have our basic house pattern, it sounds like this. That's the fundamental of our track. And I always tell people if they have no inspiration, they're not sure where to start a track, I always tell them, start making a drum groove. Because if you can get a good groove going with just your drums, it's a lot easier to add in a bass line and get a feeling of the track after the groove is established. The groove is the part that makes you dance. Everything else is going to be easier to place down now. So the next stage that I would go, and you could do either one, is to find a bass line, either a bass loop or to write your own bass line. I'm going to show you both ways, and then we're just going to compare and see which one sounds better. Let's first find a bass loop. So I'm going to look up bass loop. What you'll notice is that when you get bass loops from sample packs, either on Splice or from an external website, most of the time they're going to have some sort of melodic key attached to them. This one here says synth bass loop porta DM. DM means D minor. If this was an AM, it would mean A minor. Like for example down here, BM means B minor, GM means G minor. If there is no M or it says MAG, it means it's a major. It's a good practice to try and recognize what key certain sounds are because it's going to help us later down the road when we're making this track to make sure that everything melodically fits together. Since we haven't actually put any sort of melodic elements in, it really doesn't matter what key we pick. But the important thing is once we establish a key, we need to try and stay as best as we can to that key. And what's really great about Ableton is that you don't even need to know music theory to understand what the keys are. There's a feature up here at the top where if we click this button here, we can actually select whatever key we want. So if we went D minor and we look at it on our MIDI clip here, all of these purple notes are within the key of D minor. So if I picked a D minor bass line and I wanted to write a synth line over it, all of these pink notes, in theory, are going to work within the key of D minor. If I wanted to switch this to G minor, it's now showing me only notes that work within G minor. So that one's a little bit of a cheat code. Just wanted to point that out. So since it doesn't really matter what key we pick, let's just start trying some of these bass lines. Again, I'm going to turn this down so it's not louder than my kick. Great, so I actually really like that one. So we're gonna leave this, go bass loop. Sometimes the good thing about using a bass loop is that a lot of these samples have already been processed. They've already been, a lot of them have sidechain already applied. So there's very little work that you have to do. Sometimes it's nice to also rearrange the loop. So if I wanted to take out a specific note in this bass loop and maybe move it over and get maybe a slightly different groove out of it by adjusting certain notes. Maybe I'd like readjust some of these notes like this. The possibilities are really endless. So it's really easy to find good sounding bass loops and then rearrange them and make them your own in that way. Alternatively, we can write our own bass lines as well. This is what we're going to use our MIDI channel for. So if I double click on this MIDI channel, I can either go into the Ableton sound section, select bass, and use any of these bass presets that Ableton has for us. Some of the ones I like to use are the basic Jupo bass. That one's really nice. Another one would be the basic sub boom. This is more of like a dirty kind of bass sound. Basic sub sine is also good. Really simple. If you're wondering where the sound is coming from, I'm just playing it on this keyboard here. And there's also there's tons of other ones that I use too. We could also use an external plugin. So if we have you have a plugin like Serum or you have a plugin like Diva, a lot of these have bass presets. So you know, we can open up some of these and see what these sound like. So for this track, I'm actually going to use one of the bass presets that I use quite a bit. It's called MK Bass Hollow Octave, and I've done a little bit of adjusting on certain parameters on it, but it sounds like this. It honestly sounds pretty close to the Jupo bass within Ableton, but it's got like a little extra warmth to it that I like, but you could easily use any other bass sound for this. So if we want to write a bass line, actually program the notes, we're going to highlight a section here, right clicking, insert MIDI clip. Now this is going to open up our MIDI clip. This is essentially just a piano. Like you can see the black notes, the white notes, and when I hover over here, it tells me what note is being played. If I wanted to write a track in D minor, I would make sure that this purple button is selected. I would set it to D minor, and then I would just click the scale button. And now it's only going to show me notes that are within the scale of D minor. It's not going to let me be out of key. One good rule of thumb that I find makes it easier to keep things in key is whatever your scale is. So in this case, it's D minor. I like to make the very first note of my bass line also the same as the key. So I'm going to make the first note D because we're working in D minor. If we were working in F minor, I would make the first note F. It just makes everything a little bit cleaner and easier to adjust if we want to bring in other samples. Let's go back to D minor. Let's make that first note D. So let's bring it down so it's the right octave. It's going to sound like a deep bass note. Try it even lower. Right there. That's the spot that I like it at. I think if it was an octave higher, it's a little bit too high. There's not enough low end coming out of it, so I just want to bring it down to the D that's one octave below that. Now that feels a little bit more like I would feel that in my chest in the club. So the way that I like to write bass lines is I'm going to establish what key I'm in. So we have our D note as the first note. And then I'm going to just listen to my track with just the kick. So I can actually hold control and click S on specific channels. So I'm going to click S on Diva while holding control. And I'm also going to click S on the kick channel while holding control. Now it's only going to play my kick and my bass channel at the same time. And so I'm going to write out a pattern only using the note of D. So now that we established what the rhythm of our bass line is going to be, we can now take the notes that we've put in and slightly adjust them to give it more of like a melodic feeling rather than just playing one single note. So maybe we try, bringing the second note up and these other notes up a little bit more. And again, since we have our scale selected, no matter what purple note we put it on, it's going to stay in key. Because again, if I turn off this scale button, if I were to put it on B, that wouldn't be in the scale of D minor. So again, this is why this tool is so useful. Great, I like that pattern. It's got a nice feeling to it. So since we have loop selected, it's going to loop everything inside of here. So we can actually drag this across the timeline all the way up to the end of our 4 bars. One thing I will show us though is that if we do decide to pick a bass line, whether it's a bass loop or we make our own bass, it's important that we sidechain our bass to our kick. This prevents any weird frequencies from clashing in the low end. A thing called phasing can happen, which basically just means it's canceling out audio. To prevent this from potentially happening, it's always good to sidechain your bass and then make adjustments if you feel like it doesn't quite need as much or maybe it needs a little bit more. I think almost all the time I'm adding some type of sidechain to my bass line. So the way that we can do that with stock Ableton is to open up a compressor. The compressor might look a little bit complicated. Just kind of ignore it for now. It's not super important to understand. But I'm just going to tell you how we can set up our sidechain. And what sidechain is going to do is anytime our kick plays, it's just going to duck the volume of our bass, creating this kind of pumping feeling while also preventing any sort of clashing happening in our low end. What we'll do is we'll go to the very side of this compressor where it says sidechain, we're going to press the down arrow. It's going to open up this section here. We're going to click external, and then under source, we're going to click our kick. So now every time that our kick plays, we're going to see it inside of the compressor. So all these peaks here, that's the information that our kick is sending to this compressor. And then we're just going to bring the threshold down. And what this threshold is basically doing is anytime the volume of that kick hits that threshold that we're setting, it's going to duck our bass to get it out of the way of our kick. So you can see in a very extreme example of this is if I bring it all the way to the bottom. I usually find somewhere kind of in the middle of that kick shape is a good place to start. Yeah, so somewhere around there is probably pretty good. Alternatively, if you have a plugin like Kickstart or Shaperbox, works in a very similar way where our sidechain input is going to come from the kick. We're going to set this to audio, and then we're going to play our bass line, and we're going to see the visual of our kick. So why this plugin is really good is it actually shows us the relationship between where our kick ends and where our bass line starts. In a perfect world, the bass line would start as the kick is ending. Imaginary line where the kick ends and then the bass line comes in. That is in a perfect world, and that's like the most clean possible way for you to do bass lines. But the thing I've noticed is that super clean stuff sometimes sounds really boring, so it's not super important to make sure that everything is super perfect. So this yellow line is the shape of that volume duck in our bass line. I like to draw out the shape of that kick, so we try and get as close as we can to that perfect kick ends, bass line starts. But maybe there's a little bit of an overlap, and that gives it a little bit of character. So let's just listen to the kick and bass and then make our adjustments. Somewhere around there is probably pretty good. And then this dial over here is like our dry wet knob. It's just telling you how much ducking is going to actually happen. So if we didn't want to duck the bass all the way completely silent before it comes back in, we would bring this back away from 100. But most of the time, I like to leave this at 100%, but I'll use the band feature, which means that everything in the yellow is going to be sidechained and everything above the yellow isn't going to be sidechained. This is just soloing in on the low frequency stuff. Like I was talking about, it's going to prevent any low information from hitting at the same time, but it's going to leave all of the higher frequency things. So it actually sounds often a little bit more natural if you use the band feature and set the mix to 100%. So just to recap, again, you can use the compressor or you can use a plugin like Kickstart. Either works, they're both effective. Great, so I'm going to call this my bass line now. We have our kick, we have our drums, we have our bass line. Once I get to this point in my tracks, I like to do a thing. I don't have a name for it, but what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole section, we're going to highlight it, and we're going to Control D to duplicate it. What I'm about to do is I'm going to give myself a little bit of a moment where there's no low end. I'm going to filter out the bass, and then halfway through this new looped section, that full bass and that full kick is going to come through. Because for me, the part that gets me going and gets me excited is the part where the bass comes in, right? There's always a little bit of a pause, and then the bass hits you. It's kind of like a drop. The way we're going to create this moment is by bringing the bass line next to the kick, just so they're closer together and we can see what's actually happening. I'm going to right click on my kick channel. I'm going to duplicate this channel. I'm going to delete all the kicks from one half of the first channel, and I'm going to delete all the kicks from the second half of the second channel. Whatever kick is playing in the first half, I'm going to call this my filtered kick, and I'm going to do the same thing for my bass line. So I'm going to duplicate this channel. I'm going to take away the first half of one of the channels. Then I'm going to take away the second half of another channel. And whatever channel is playing first, I'm going to call this my filtered bass line. On this filtered bass line, I'm going to double click on the channel. We have our bassline sound, our sidechain. Then we're going to load up a filter. You could use an EQ, you could use an auto filter, whatever source of filtering you want to use. We're going to take out all of our low information by using a high pass. So if I set this high pass to maybe 180, for example, we can listen to the before and after. So this is what the bassline sounds without the filter. Now this is what it's going to sound like with the filter. What you'll notice here is the bass now sounds really thin, and that's a good thing because at the halfway mark of this loop, we're going to switch back to our full unfiltered bass line, and it's just going to come in with a lot more impact. We're going to repeat the process with our filtered kick. We're going to go to a high pass, and we're just going to take out, anywhere from 130 to like 180 hertz on the filter, our kick before the filter, and then our kick after. With those changes now, we have a little bit of a moment where that bass comes in.